This video is step 3 of adding details to your acrylic painting. Once you're finished color blocking, you need to move on to adding your details. This is the second layer of your painting. It's going to be a lot more of an opaque layer, and you're going to be able to add in your details and your color variations. Now would also be a good time to look at your image for any textures that you need to add. Oftentimes in this step you're addressing shadows and highlights, so it's important to remember that your shadows and highlights aren't necessarily just adding black and white. Oftentimes you are looking for any color variations, like in this image there is black, there is white, but there's also spots where some of the shadows are looking like a dark green, or some of the shadows on the yellow pepper are a dark green, or you can see a little bit of the red and orange reflecting onto the yellow pepper. So you're going to not just look for places to add black and white, but places where the colors change and where the shadows aren't necessarily black and white shadows, but might be shadows from a different color. When your whole image is color blocked, it's time to move on to this step. So you can see in my image that I have one layer everywhere of color, and now it's time to start adding some details and some highlights and some shadows. You get to choose where and when you do this. Remember that painting is not a necessarily linear process, but you can look at where do you want to start, would be an interesting place to start adding in those color variations, details, and shadows. In this case, I'm going to use these little plant leaves to start adding my shadows and colors. First, I'm going to create my base color. I am using my cool blue and my yellow to start, and then because I'm feeling like this is too bright of a green, I'm also going to add in a little more red to make it a little bit more of a neutral green, and then I'm going to just keep tweaking the color and adding to it till I have what I need. Depending on how much of the color I need, I'm going to keep making more and more of this color. So I'm happy with the color, but I need more paint so that I don't run out in between. So I'm going to make a good amount of this paint and keep adding to it so that I can have enough for my whole painting. Now, because I'm dealing with color variations, I'm not just making one color. I'm going to take some of that color that I made. So this is kind of the base color of green, and I'm going to take some of that color of green that I made, and I need to make darker and lighter versions of that. So I pulled some of that green to the side, and now I'm adding in a little more blue, and I'm adding a little bit of black to make my green a little bit darker. I noticed that in my picture it's a little more of a blue-green where it's darker. So I'm going to add a little blue and a little black to make that darker. Pre-mixed my colors, and now it's time to start painting. So I'm going to tackle one of these little succulent leaves, and what I'm going to do is start with my base color and get a nice coat on it. It already has one coat from my first layer, but I need to add my second layer on there before I start adding in any of my values. So I'm going to go back and forth between my reference image and look for those color variations, and then start to add them and blend them into my painting. Whenever I'm blending, I like to use a flat brush for larger areas that have a smooth blend. So now I'm going to add in my shadow. I'm looking where the light goes in my picture, and then I'm going to add in the darker area. I can go back and forth between adding in my main color and my darker color so that they blend together seamlessly. In this case, I'm running my brush over where they meet, and that action alone is going to start blending my paint. So I'm adding a little more of my middle green color, and then I'm going to start adding in some more of the blue. So I felt like my blue shadow was getting lost with the darker of the black shadow. So I'm adding in a little blue, and then I'm actually able to blend it right on top of the canvas. So you don't, as long as your paint is wet, you do not have to have all of your colors blended right away. You can blend them straight on the canvas. Now I'm going to start adding in my highlight and then blending it all the way in. It's not going to be a super sharp highlight. It's just an area where the light is hitting and it's getting lighter. And then I'm using a clean, damp brush, not wet, but damp, to blend those colors together so I can get a really nice smooth blend from light to dark on my sphere. If any of my shadows get lost, I can re-put them in, and this is going to be a kind of a whole process of working back and forth between lights and darks and middle tones. Once I'm happy with my values, I'm going to go and start looking for any color variations. You'll notice that I've switched to a pointed brush. This is great for any small detail areas. It's going to give you a lot more control. So I'm adding in some yellow and some blue, and I'm doing a little bit less blending because I still want you to actually see the yellow and the blue. So I'm doing a little little bit of stippling so that I can still see those color variations and they don't get 100% blended in. You'll also notice that sometimes I'm going in with straight white onto my canvas and then blending it in on the canvas. So that's a fine way to do it as well. You just want to make sure that you're working while your paint is still wet and still workable. In this process, you can get stuck on certain areas, so it's a good idea at some point to start taking a step back and looking at your whole painting, not getting caught up on the tiniest of details. Here's a quick overview so that you can see start to finish how I might tackle a whole new part of these leaves that are on my plant, and I'm going to tackle them all one by one. This is where not getting hung up on all the tiny details is a good idea, especially if you have a lot to do. Keep taking step backs from your painting and looking at it from about 6 feet away, and that will help you kind of get new perspective for what you're working on. Keep working through your painting. You can jump from area to area. If you get bored in one area, go to another while that area is drying, and keep looking at your reference image. Look for those color variations, look for those highlights, look for those shadows.